Imagine you are 23 years old.
Right, just 23.
Yeah. You're sitting in a damp, dimly lit prison cell in Lahore. And through the barred windows, you can literally hear the guards outside building the gallows.
The exact gallows that will hang you.
Exactly. They're going to hang you in a matter of days. And the warden comes in, offers you a final chance to pray, to seek forgiveness, or find some shred of peace in the promise of an afterlife. And you just laugh in his face.
I mean, that goes against every fundamental survival instinct we possess as human beings, doesn't it?
Right.
When facing the absolute end, the instinct is to grab onto literally any lifeline available, especially a spiritual one. So to reject that comfort, it requires a level of conviction that is, frankly, almost impossible to fathom.
It really is. And welcome to today's deep dive for you listening right now. Today, we are exploring a deeply moving, just historically profound essay titled, Why I Am an Atheist.
It's an incredible piece of writing.
It is. It was written on October 1930 by Bhagat Singh, who was this young, immensely famous Indian revolutionary. And he wrote it directly from that death row cell, just days before his execution by the British colonial government.
But before we really get into the text, we want to set a clear boundary for our mission today with you.
Yeah, that's important.
This essay contains incredibly sharp political and religious critiques coming from a man staring down his own mortality. Our goal here isn't to endorse these specific views or to take a side in any religious or political debates.
Right, absolutely not.
We are simply going to impartially explore the ideas, the historical context, and the fascinating mind of the author.
Because I know that bringing up a text written on death row might sound incredibly heavy or, maybe even bleak to you listening. But today's deep dive is actually designed to be a comforting space.
A completely comforting space, yeah.
We are going to look at how a human being finds immense inner peace, absolute courage, and deep compassion in the face of life's ultimate chaos, and doing so by relying entirely on the strength within themselves. Okay, let's unpack this. Why would a man facing the gallows explicitly refuse the comfort of prayer?
Well, to crack that mystery, we first have to look at the immediate catalyst for the essay. Because Bhagat Singh wasn't just sitting in his cell trying to write like a philosophical manifesto for the general public.
No, really, he wasn't.
No, not at all. He was actually defending his character against his own inner circle.
Wait, his friends?
Yeah, his peers. After he gained this massive national fame from his revolutionary activities, specifically the Delhi Assembly bombing and the Lahore conspiracy case, some of his own people started whispering.
Wow, whispering what?
They claimed his vocal atheism was just a symptom of a swelled head. They basically accused him of purely ego-driven vanity. What's fascinating here is how he dissects that accusation.
Which is just a wild accusation when you really think about the circumstances. I mean, imagine being on trial for your life, completely vulnerable, stripped of all your freedom, and the people closest to you accuse you of just showing off.
It's absurd, right?
It's like being accused of refusing an anesthetic during major surgery just to look tough to the nurses. It doesn't make any sense. But Singh pushes back on this accusation in a remarkably grounded way, I think.
He really does.
He openly admits he is just a human being. He writes that he can be bossy, that he has weaknesses, and that, yeah, he takes pride in his ideas. But he points out a massive logical flaw in their definition of vanity.
Right, because Singh argues that if he were truly driven by empty vanity, like if his ego had completely severed him from reality, he wouldn't deny God at all.
Exactly.
Instead, he would either claim that he possessed godlike qualities, or he would go the full distance and declare himself to be a god, like a prophet sent to save India.
Because in either of those arrogant scenarios, he would still be relying on the structure of a higher supernatural power to elevate himself. He'd just be placing himself at the top of the pyramid.
Precisely.
So by completely rejecting the existence of an omnipresent, all-knowing creator, he isn't inflating his ego. He is actively shrinking his place in the universe. He's accepting that he is just a biological organism on a rock in space, completely alone.
And to prove this wasn't just some sudden rush of fame going to his head, Singh meticulously traces his entire intellectual evolution for his critics. Because he wasn't born a skeptic.
Right. He had a very religious upbringing, didn't he?
Very much so. He was brought up under the care of his father, who was a staunch Arya Samaji.
And for context for you listening, the Arya Samaj is a Hindu reform movement that places absolute infallible authority on the ancient Vedic texts.
Exactly. So Singh grew up in an environment of strict text-based devotion. When he went off to DAV college in Lahore, He was a devout believer. I mean, he describes sitting for hours early in the morning and at dusk, just diligently chanting religious mantras.
Wait, I'm stuck on something here. So he eventually joins the Revolutionary Party to fight for Indian independence. But even in that movement, atheism wasn't the norm, right?
No, not at all.
If he is surrounded by these romantic revolutionaries, including the famous Kakori martyrs, who were his predecessors hanged a few years prior for a train robbery against the British, and all of them were finding immense comfort in prayer before they died.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that make Singh more likely to seek out that exact same comfort?
You would think so, yeah.
Right? Why walk away from the one thing bringing his friends so much peace in such a terrifying line of work? I mean, think about a time in your own life when you had to abandon a comforting childhood belief because your own logic and reading demanded it. It's so difficult. It's not vain at all.
And that is the exact tension Singh was wrestling with. He realized that the movement was heavily reliant on mysticism and what he called romantic militancy.
Romantic militancy. That's a great phrase.
It is. The respected leader of the movement, Sachinder Nath Sanyal, practically sang mystical praises to God in his revolutionary writings. But Singh recognized a strategic vulnerability there.
A vulnerability in relying on faith.
Yes. If he was going to shoulder the responsibility of this massive movement, especially when facing the overwhelming industrialized military might of the British Empire, he felt they just couldn't rely on blind faith or romantic poetry. He needed rigorous, undeniable realism.
So he hits the books. He says to himself, study more and more. And he completely immerses himself in global philosophy and political theory.
He really dove in.
Yeah, he reads the anarchist Bakunin, he reads Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, and Charles Darwin. And this wasn't just passive reading, this was a systematic dismantling of his entire worldview.
Let's look at how those specific books acted as a literal wrecking ball to his childhood faith. When Singh studies Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, it fundamentally replaces the need for a divine creator.
Because Darwin provided a mechanical, biological explanation for human existence.
Right. Natural selection and the accidental mixture of nebulae, which meant Singh no longer needed the concept of an intelligent designer to explain why we are here.
And then he reads Karl Marx, which shifts his focus entirely from the spiritual to the material. Because Marx's theory argues that history is driven by material conditions and class struggle, not by divine providence.
Exactly. So if you combine Darwin telling you there is no biological creator with Marx telling you that human suffering is caused by economic exploitation rather than, some spiritual deficiency, the entire foundation of a supreme being just collapses for him.
Yeah. Wow. So by the end of 1926, Singh's rigorous study convinced him that an almighty creator simply didn't exist.
He was completely convinced. And I want to pause on that process for a second, because giving up a comforting childhood belief based entirely on the evidence in front of you, especially when your friends are desperately clinging to that belief, is an incredibly painful, isolating experience.
It requires a profound intellectual surrender.
It really does. It's the exact opposite of vanity.
But if it wasn't arrogance that killed his faith, what was the final nail in the coffin? Here's where it gets really interesting, because this brings us to the emotional core of his essay, which I found incredibly moving.
It's powerful stuff.
His atheism wasn't born out of some cold, calculated academic hatred of religion. It was born out of a profound, bleeding empathy for the state of the world.
Yes. Singh lays out the classic philosophical problem of suffering, but he does it with the fiery passion of someone who has spent his entire short life fighting systemic oppression.
He throws down a direct challenge to believers.
He asks a devastating question. If an all-powerful, all-knowing, and entirely loving God created this world, why did he create a world overflowing with woe, grief, and countless miseries?
And he paints this incredibly vivid, horrifying picture of reality. Talks about millions dying of hunger in slums that are dirtier than grim prison dungeons.
It's a brutal image.
He points to laborers watching apathetically while the wealthy suck their blood, and capitalist nations throwing surplus food into the sea to manipulate market prices, while people literally starve in the streets.
And he demands to know how anyone can look at this bloodbath of inequality and say, well, all is well in God's kingdom.
Right, and he uses these intense historical comparisons that force the reader into a corner. He brings up Nero, the Roman emperor, who famously played music while Rome burned for his own morbid enjoyment.
And Genghis Khan.
Yeah, Genghis Khan, whose name is globally synonymous with the massacre of thousands. We universally condemn those historical figures as monsters.
But then Singh pivots and says, If there is a deity overseeing this current living hell of daily systemic human suffering, then that deity is an eternal Nero.
Oh, wow. That is a heavy statement.
It is. He says that deity is inflicting miseries that surpass Genghis Khan every single day just by allowing the world to function as it does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, he's asking, why do we excuse the supreme deity for allowing mass starvation while universally condemning the human dictator for the exact same outcome?
And when Singh presents this argument, he anticipates the cultural pushback, right? He knows exactly what the theological defenses are, particularly within the Indian context.
He grew up in it, so he knew the arguments inside and out.
The most common defense he encounters for systemic suffering is the concept of karma and transmigration of the soul. This is the idea that if someone is suffering terribly in this life, like if they're born into crushing poverty or a marginalized caste, they must have been a terrible sinner in a previous birth.
It frames extreme suffering as a form of cosmic justice.
But let's really look at how Singh dismantles that defense. Because he uses the philosophy of jurisprudence, which is the theory of law, to just tear it apart.
He points out that in modern legal theory, punishing someone is only justified if it serves one of three purposes.
Right. Revenge, deterrence, or reform.
And he walks through them systematically. Pure revenge is universally condemned by modern thinkers as barbaric. Deterrence is flawed and often ineffective.
So reform is the only widely accepted ethical justification for punishment. You punish someone to rehabilitate them into a better, peace-loving citizen.
Exactly. So Singh asks this devastating question, what reformative effect does it possibly have to punish a soul by ripping away their memory of the crime and then rebirthing them as a cow, a tree, or a desperately poor, marginalized human who is completely ignorant of why they are suffering?
Because if a person born into severe poverty has no memory of the past life sin they committed, the suffering doesn't reform them at all. It just crushes them.
It pushes them further into despair without offering any path to moral rehabilitation. Singh writes, "Do you really know the most cursed sin in this world is to be poor? Yes, poverty is a sin, it is a punishment."
That is such a striking quote.
And this is where Singh connects his philosophy directly to his revolution. He argues that these theories of past life punishment weren't handed down by a divine creator. They were meticulously coined by the privileged classes.
So what does this all mean? It completely flips the narrative. He views these theological structures as deliberate tools of social control. He points out how the highest castes use these theories to justify their generational wealth and keep the lower castes uneducated and subservient.
It's brilliant, sociologically speaking.
Think about the mechanics of this. If you can convince a starving laborer that their poverty is their own fault from a past life, and that challenging the status quo is a literal sin against cosmic law, you completely paralyze their political will to rebel.
You neutralize the revolution before it even starts. The British colonial rule benefited immensely from a populace that viewed their subjugation as divine destiny rather than, political exploitation.
So insidious.
Singh actually quotes the American writer Upton Sinclair to hammer this home. He says, "Make a man a firm believer in the immortality of the soul, then rob him of all that he possesses. He will willingly help you in the process."
I really want to highlight the immense political risk Singh took by writing this. In the 1930s, Singh was a massive symbol of the Indian independence movement. He was fighting to liberate the masses, but those masses were deeply, profoundly religious.
Oh, absolutely.
By openly mocking the concept of God and dismantling karma, he risked catastrophic public relations backlash. He risked alienating the very people who were currently protesting his execution.
But it shows a pure commitment to truth over popularity. He simply refused to accept that systemic poverty, British exploitation, and cruelty were just God's will.
Right, he demanded that the public recognize that colonial oppression wasn't there because God ordained it. It was there because of the force of British guns and the fatalistic apathy of the masses.
Now, this raises an important question. If Singh completely strips away the idea of a divine creator, if he proves through Darwin and Marx that the sky is entirely empty, he is left with a glaring psychological puzzle.
If God didn't create humanity, why on earth did humanity universally invent God?
Singh outlines a brilliant psychological and sociological theory to answer this. He posits that early humans invented the concept of God out of a terrifying realization of their own limitations and vulnerabilities.
I mean, think of early religion like the heavy scaffolding used to build a skyscraper. When primitive human societies were first forming, They face terrifying storms, unpredictable diseases, and constant threats from nature.
They desperately needed a comforting figure.
Yeah, a cosmic parent, basically, to calm their psychological distress. And furthermore, society needed a deterrent. To keep the building from collapsing into chaos, early humans used the threat of a furious, all-seeing God to enforce laws and create social cohesion.
And that scaffolding was incredibly useful for early human survival. But Singh argues that humanity's mind is now fully built. We have modern biology, physics, sociology, and political science.
We don't need the scaffolding anymore.
Exactly. Keeping the scaffolding up isn't protecting the building anymore, it's just blocking the view of reality. It's time for humanity to tear down the scaffolding and stand firmly on its own feet, facing the universe as it actually is.
Which brings us back to that damp prison cell.
Yeah.
Because it is one thing to philosophize about standing on your own 2 feet when you are, say, reading books in a university library. It is entirely different when the gallows are being constructed outside your window.
It really is. And Singh shares a chilling story from his time in police custody a few years earlier in 1927.
Oh, right. The CID story.
Yeah. The senior superintendent of the CID, the Criminal Investigation Department, offered him a highly tempting deal. If Singh would give a statement and turn informant against the Revolutionary Party, not only would he be set free, he would be financially rewarded.
And if he refused?
If he refused, the CID had enough manufactured evidence to hang him anyway.
Wow. And Singh knew he was innocent of the specific charges they were holding him for at that time, but he also knew the colonial police had the absolute power to execute him regardless.
He was completely at their mercy.
In that terrifying moment of isolation, police officers actively tried to persuade him to pray. He was completely alone, facing the absolute end. And he documents this profound internal debate. He asked himself, am I only an atheist in days of peace and happiness? Can I stand steadfast now when the scaffolding is the only thing offering comfort?
And his conclusion is staggeringly brave. He realized he couldn't even pretend to be a believer just to soothe his anxiety. He actively refused the opiate of religion.
Even when it would have been so easy to just give in.
Fast forward to 1930, as his actual execution date approached, one of his closest friends visited him and pleaded, "When your last days come, you will begin to believe."
And what did Singh say?
Singh replied, "Never shall it happen. I consider it to be an act of degradation and demoralization. For such petty, selfish motives, I shall never pray."
For you listening, I really want to emphasize how beautiful and profoundly peaceful this specific brand of atheism is. Singh fully expected what he called the utter annihilation of his soul.
Total non-existence.
There was no heaven waiting for him, no reincarnation as a wealthy king, no luxurious paradise to reward him for his suffering, just absolute nothingness. And yet, he faced that rope with his head held high.
Because his reward, as he saw it, was simply his brief life of disinterested struggle for the freedom of humanity. He found absolute strength entirely within himself and his deep, abiding love for his fellow human beings.
He required absolutely no external validation, no cosmic scorekeeper, and no promise of a future payoff to justify his ultimate sacrifice.
It is incredibly comforting in a very grounded way.
It is. To know that a human being is capable of generating that much light, that much unwavering courage, from entirely within their own mind. So to wrap this up, Bhagat Singh's atheism was emphatically not a symptom of an inflated ego or youthful vanity.
Not at all. It was the hard-won result of rigorous critical thinking.
A deep, bleeding compassion for human suffering and a courageous commitment to facing reality exactly as it is, without any illusions.
Which leaves us with a lingering, provocative thought to take away from his 23 years of life. If we were to completely let go of the idea that our actions are being recorded for a cosmic reward or punishment in some afterlife.
If we accept that this current fleeting moment is all there truly is.
Exactly. How might that drastically change the urgency and the compassion with which we treat the people right in front of us today?
Thank you for joining us today. We're creating a comforting space away from everyday chaos. We post daily shorts and frequent videos, so please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Follow us on Insta and Facebook, @silhouettealores.
Check out our webpage, .silores.github.io.
Contents by Bhagat Ghosh. All rights reserved. See Bhagat Ghosh.
The next time you find yourself facing a storm and you feel that frantic urge to look for external scaffolding to hold you up, remember the young man who stood in a dark cell, folded his arms, and found everything he needed right there inside himself. Until next time.